The subject of the master can never be exhaustive guidance for us. Babaji Maharaj once said in Munich, I think it was in 1980, somebody had asked him a question about revising his books, and his answer was that his books needed no revision. And he also added that the present generation would not easily understand his teaching, and that his books would be really understood thousands of years later. So this has been the secret of the teachings of all masters. And the secret is that they come far before their time. And the idea is that coming, say, 2000 years before they are due, they put us into the future to that extent. It is as if a man of the future comes into his own past, which is our present. It is also almost like the time travel of science fiction. You know, there's a story about a man, it is called The Sleeper Awakes. I don't know how many of you have read it. The story is that a man takes a certain amount of gold and goes back into the past. And having gone back several centuries, he invests that gold in that past. And then he comes back into his own present, and that money he has invested is growing and growing and growing. And when he goes to sleep and wakes up the next morning, he owns the whole earth, whole world. You see. I think this is the way by which the masters cultivate us and make us their own. What I'm suggesting is that they are far ahead of us in evolution, and they deliberately come to our present, this life, and invest their spiritual wealth in us. And when they wake up again, we are the spiritual wealth they have sort of cultivated and grown and harvested. In our own human situation, we also do something similar to this. We have the doctors, the missionaries who go to the jungles with the primitive tribes, and they live like them, learn their language, eat what they eat. They become like them, you see, in all ways. But one thing they cannot possibly lose or change, that is their culture, their level of evolution. And this they transfer to the primitives and raise them to their own level. So we are all doing the same work, but within our own lifespan. And a teacher does it with the children. He comes down to the level of the children and raises them to his own level of intellect, education. So what distinguishes a master from us is nothing except that we can do it only within our own lifetime. He does it for thousands of years. We can only do it in our lifespan. The masters do it over a period of thousands of years. And the important thing to recognize is that it always involves a personal sacrifice of a very high order. We make the same sacrifice, the masters make the same sacrifice. Difference is only one of degree. The second difference in the approach, we do this work because of sympathy, they do their work because of compassion. We are human beings working with human beings, very much on our own level, except that the degree of difference is not very big. Primitive to modern times is not a big difference. But when a master descends to us, the difference can be as if we go back to the amoeba or something like that and work on them to make them human beings. And this is what makes communication so difficult. See, we can communicate one human being with another human being, we can communicate by gesture, by look, and with difficulty learn a language too if necessary. But imagine how difficult it will be if a human being has to become an amoeba and learn to communicate with that in such a way that the amoeba must understand him. So this is the magnitude of the task that a master undertakes. And we have examples of similar work in human beings also. Human beings working with chimpanzees, with gorillas, with porpoises, all sorts of funny things. So you see, the ordinary human being, when he becomes sympathetic to life around him, makes similar endeavors. At the most selfish, self-centered level, a human being is concerned only with himself or herself. At a slightly higher level, the human being is concerned with other human beings. At a yet higher level, they are concerned with other life forms existing with us. But at the highest level, such a personality is concerned with all life at all times, past, present, future, it doesn't matter. Now, if you understand this idea, you will find, or you will realize, how small a thing is the so-called social service among human beings. It is nothing except the breaking of the shell of selfishness. We are always talking about social service. People say, I am doing good to others, why should I meditate? But if they could be made to understand this aspect of service from the highest to the lowest, they will themselves realize that it is very foolish to claim that they are serving humanity at all. They will understand that they are only coming out of themselves and becoming human beings. A chicken within the egg is not yet a chicken. It becomes a chicken only when it breaks out of itself and comes out into the open. So we can say that a One born as a human being becomes a human being when he thinks of others, stopping to think of himself. So coming back to the master again, we see how enormous a task they have undertaken, because it is the master who has to make every single effort to raise us up. The first sacrifice, the biggest sacrifice, is to come back to a level which they have evolved out of thousands of years ago. And then they have to design the way of teaching, the way of practice, to make us come up to their level of evolution. For us it is nothing. We just accept and learn. This is why I am often very sad when people say, oh, I have made such a sacrifice to come and see Babuji, and I have made so much sacrifice to sit in meditation. What sacrifice? For whom? So this only comes, you see, such an attitude in an abhyasi or an ordinary person comes only because of a total ignorance of the master and his work. This is why I say again and again that it is not enough or necessary even to understand his teaching, but it is necessary to understand the master. Because the teaching of the master is like the worm that you throw into the water to bring a fish. It's nothing at all. I mean, having come down to this level, he can design 1,000 ways of teaching us. But to make us understand what he is, why he has come to us, what he is going to do for us, this is an almost impossible task. Even for a master. I was able to understand this myself only after a very long time. And it was because I used to wonder why Babuji had to travel so much. Because if his teaching was what elevated us, all that we have to do was to print books and send them all over the world. And if it was the practice that was to elevate us, then the preceptors were enough. They can teach us the practice, but it is the master who is the most important, in fact, most vitally important element of this teaching. And to make us understand this, Babuji had to travel again and again, be present with us, show himself to us, suffer for us. We can understand a thought by reading about it, by thinking about it. We can understand a practice and benefit from it by practicing it. And we can understand the master only by living with him. A master is not a teaching that we can read about him and understand him. A master is not a practice that we can practice him and understand it. Being a living person, we have to live with him and understand his life and benefit from his presence. Therefore, the master had to go again and again, as many times as he could, to as many places as he could, to show himself. And that is why Babuji used to tell us again and again what Kabir had said hundreds of years ago, that even if the master is living next door to the disciple and only one wall is separating their houses, yet the disciple must lock his house for 1 week and go and live with the master. I used to wonder why this was necessary. After all, is it not enough that the master comes to us? You see, it is like whether you come to me or I come to you, what difference does it make? Small. There is a small difference. He comes to us because of his divine love for us, and we begin to go to him only when we start to love him. Therefore, we find that as long as an abhyasi is concerned only with spiritual progress, spiritual benefit, he doesn't bother to go to the master. And it is true that they can get a great deal of benefit by staying where they are, because that is the benefit that the teaching and the practice gives. But if an abhyasi wants to become like the master, here. Now, I would like to give you an example of a candle. The candle goes wherever there is darkness and illuminates it. That is the master going round and round to illuminate us, our hearts. But can the darkness ever come to the candle to be illuminated? That is what the master waits for when the abhyasi comes to him. And that miracle can happen only between human beings, not between darkness and light. And it is made possible only when love comes into the heart of the abhyasi. Because then all idea of benefit, of growth, of getting something from the master, they go. And when love takes their place, now the abhyasi thinks what he can do for the master, what he can give to the master. Now this is another thing we should all examine very carefully. Because even at the human level, there's a great deal of confusion about this love. Because we think love is getting. But if we understand it correctly, we find love is giving. And the more one gives, the more one loves. And we can therefore say with confidence that one gives totally when one loves totally. And this is what the master gives. He comes to us totally himself and gives totally himself to us in an endeavor, in an effort to make us like himself. The master's presence is an expression of his total love for us. What he gives us totally without any reservation, without anything being asked for in return, is himself. And this is the thing that he has to teach us also, that we can become like him, not by spiritual progress. You see, I am quite certain about this, that spiritual progress is only a lure to draw us to himself. You see, his real effort is to make us divine lovers like himself. Lover means one who loves, and a divine lover who is one who loves divinely. That means without reservation, without limitation, without anything to restrict it. That is why it is called universal love. We have heard so often that universal love does not mean loving everything in the universe. That can never be possible. But it is a love which is universal in its effulgence, in its outflow from the source. And therefore we say God is love. We don't say God loves, we say God is love. And this is the real effort of the Master, that he wants to make us also divine lovers. And when he comes and gives us the teaching and the practice, they are the first steps in this emancipation of ourselves from ourselves to the divine stage. You can understand it by saying that when human beings love each other, they call it human love. And divine love can be possible only between divine persons, divine beings. And per contra, when there is divine love between two persons, both must be divine. So when we are able to love the Master as he loves us, it means we have become like him. So the proof of our having evolved to his level is not the performance of miracles, not the superhuman strength, not beauty, not any of these attributes. The proof is when we can love like him. So one test of a master, if an abhyasi or one who wants to become an abhyasi wants to find a master, look for a man who is capable of universal love. Unfortunately, we are taught the other things, you see. We are taught other things to look for strength, power, miracles, things like that. That is why all great masters have warned us to beware of miracles. Miracles only indicate the presence of power, not love. That is why in all truly spiritual paths, miracles are totally avoided. It's not permitted.